Being here tonight for our annual meeting and State of the Loon report. We're going to get started at 6:45, so just hang tight for a couple of minutes and we will begin. Okay.
Use your computer?
It is.
Can I close the lid this much?
No, I think for us to have this thing done, what we were thinking perhaps is, so these, what we're thinking is that if we had it, so these are puts that you can actually put things right here. If that works for you. Oh, we are right here.
So camera here,
Stand somewhere. Right
right
here.
here is perfect because they want to see what you're going to be presenting.
The trouble is that it's got glare, so.
Can we, what if we put it even that way?
All right, wait a minute, let me cover it up then, that's probably it. Okay. Let me try to bring this meeting to order. Warm welcome to all of you who have come to participate in the 2023 annual meeting and to hear the annual report of Loon progress from Executive Director Harry Vogel. I am Robert Rockford, Chair of the Loon Preservation Committee, and our annual meeting format is a little different from last year, but as is our custom, let me begin with a few brief remarks, and then the meeting will proceed. My own experience with this illustrious organization and with Loons goes back to LPC's very early days. My late wife and I began supporting the committee more than 40 years ago, and together she and I successfully rescued a chick with a fishing line wrapped around its beak about 30 years ago. Many of you will have had the same experience. It certainly bonded us to Loons and to the LPC. 9 years I have been a trustee and now serve as chair of our energetic board of trustees, joining Harry Vogel's enduring guidance, LPC's effective efforts to expand and improve loon population numbers, and the entire loon experience in New Hampshire. Our illustrious executive director has not from a loon, but he has bonded very closely with Loons for many years of fantastic service to this organization. Now, the LPC, some of you may know, the LPC is 40 years old as a thriving organization. And because of the common loon's place in the avian universe as an ecological exemplar, it is the oldest living avian species. Peter Richards, who was then president of New Hampshire Audubon, who termed the loon a symbol of the wilderness, asked Rawson Wood to join him in establishing the LPC in 1975 to preserve and improve the survival of the loon in New Hampshire. And look what you and this organization have accomplished since our founding in 1975. At the founding of the LPC, New Hampshire lakes had only 214 adults and 51 surviving chicks. Numbers of chicks even fell to a low of 36 in 1978. Harry will give you the latest loon statistics later tonight, but I can happily report on last year's numbers, where we had 345 breeding pairs and 106 unpaired loons on 229 lakes, or 451 loons, an increase in 75 to 2. And last year, 177 chicks successfully placed. Of equal importance, LPC biologists investigated 16 eggs for dangerous contaminants and want, as Harry will claim, to ramp up our egg testing, expensive as the process remains. LPC is not only a preservation organization, it's a research organization, thanks to your help and support. It also builds rafts, puts them in, and takes them out to help with loon success. And John, Harry, and many others, Caroline and others, spend their winter months rescuing loons. We all read about the 10 loons last winter before this one, and of the great success of rescues all the time. Now, so the LPC has now become the organization that Richard Wood began nearly 50 years ago, has become a world-leading non-governmental entity worthy of your support and support from all of us. The LPC's Board of Trustees, which met earlier today, believes that your organization leads the world in research-based knowledge. No place else in the world is the equal of what happens in Hampshire. Indeed, I am pleased to report that the LPC board and its executive director intend over the next few years to advance our research accomplishments and to contribute even more significantly than present to global knowledge of common loon behavior and loon avifaunal understanding. And again, certainly with your support. You will shortly hear reports from chairs of board committees about the current prospects and ambitions of the LPC. You will also be asked to approve our new trustees. You hear a report of the officers elected by the board. As you will note from the reports that you will shortly hear, the LPC is in very good shape as we lean forward to 2024 and beyond. You trustees and the executive director and his team are building firmly on what Richards and Wood began so sagely a few decades ago. Thank you all from me and from the board and from the entire staff, all you do to be such a key part in the continuing effort to make New Hampshire a welcoming and safe environment for loons. Now, the first item of business is to ask you please to, I hope I can get a motion to approve the minutes of last year, August 25th, 2023. They're on your chairs. We have a move, we have a second. Thank you. Discussion? Not all in favor, please say aye. Thank you. Now let me turn the meeting over to the chair of our governance committee for her report and the development. Brenda?
Welcome all. I am Brenda Stowe. I'm the vice chair of the trustees. And I would first of all like to announce our new slate of officers for this year. The first is Chair Bob Rothberg, who just spoke. Vice chair is me, Brenda Stowe, and our treasurer is Bob Barney. And I would ask for the membership to all approve the slate of officers. Can I? Thank you. And we have two new trustees who will be joining us this year. And I'm just going to give you a really brief bio of the two. The first one is Michael Fenalosa. Michael, can you stand up? It's Michael. Michael has a lifelong love of New Hampshire's Lakes region, which began as a child when his parents purchased a 150-year-old farmhouse in Gilmanton on Manning Lake, aka Guinea Pond back in the day, as their second home in the mid-50s. He spent many summers enjoying all that rural life in New Hampshire had to offer as a boy. 40 plus years ago, he and his wife, Marilyn, acquired the property from his parents, and for the past 20 years, they've spent every summer from May through October there. One of his great pleasures has been enjoying a regular pair of loons on Manning Lake, watching their offspring grow from very tiny chicks, hitching rides on their parents' backs, to being able to fly out in the fall before ice in. Michael's professional background is in finance, initially as a banker and later as a college professor. Our second new trustee is Dan Nye. Dan, can you stand up? Dan is in the back of the row. Dan grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts. He and his wife, Megan, raised their family in California while spending summers with Dan's extensive family in Sandwich, New Hampshire. In 2016, they moved to Squam Lake in Moultonborough, where they enjoy the company of loons throughout the day and listen to their beautiful calls at night, as I'm sure we all enjoy. Dan and Megan love to hike in the area and kayak on Squam. They have two daughters who are both in colleges in the Northeast. So we welcome these two new trustees to our board and look forward to their varied backgrounds and knowledge. We're trying to maintain a diverse board in terms of all of our different specialties and what we can add. I'm a veterinarian, so I'm involved with the science part of the board. And so hopefully you all will welcome and greet both Dan and Michael if you get a chance tonight. Thank you.
We have new trustees that you've just heard, but we're also very sadly must announce the end of the terms of service of two of our most distinguished trustees. Kristen Begor, who was chair before me, cannot be here tonight. She's a hydrologist. She served on the board for 9 years. She's in charge of all the loons on Sunapee Lake and everything else that happens on Sunapee Lake. And she was a chair of this organization for 3 years. And she's a grandmother sitting tonight and can't be with us. So very sorry to lose Kristen, and equally sorry to lose our treasurer since 2015, Glenn Green. If you'd stand, and Glenn runs Crystal Lake. Glenn has served in all sorts of capacities as a trustee, and also, as I understand, not from immediate knowledge, but from received knowledge, has received awards with his wife for looking after everything that happens at Crystal Lake. Thank you, Glenn, for 9 years of extraordinary service to this organization. This organization was also deeply saddened to learn of the unexpected passing of our former trustee and close friend and legal advisor, Eric Tossig. Eric passed away. He was part of the board from 2006 after a successful career as a corporate lawyer. And not only was he a member of the board, he also dealt with a number of the issues that came before this board, to do with the Marcus Trust, to do with state regulation, and everything to do with steering clear of the problems that were more common when the organization was younger. The LPC was just one of the many organizations that benefited from his philanthropic support and soft heart. There's no question that he will be remembered throughout the Lakes region for his generous spirit and kindness, and particularly by the LPC. Let's have a minute of silence for Eric. If I can ask the Finance Committee to report next. And then we'll be followed by the Development Committee.
Okay, numbers. This is the highlight of the evening. I do have a degree in economics, so I'm sorry about that. My name's Bob Varney. I'm not the judge in Wolfboro, although it does benefit me at times when I'm pulled over. They ask, "How's your wife?" And I say, "What's going on with my wife?" And then I realize he's talking about the judge's wife. But I was, some of you may recognize the name, my name as well, because I was commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services for 12 years, serving in the cabinet of 3 governors, Judd Gregg, Steve Merrill, and Gene Shaheen, and was head of EPA New England. And I'm with an environmental science consulting firm that works all around the country and in some other countries as well on environmental issues. So it's really a pleasure to be on this board. You have very talented staff that are serving you. I think most of you that are in this room that are volunteers and donors understand that, and what high quality people we have and how fortunate we are. And the board members are just fantastic people and very committed and dig into issues, and you can be so proud of them as well. And with that, I want to just say that, as you would expect, we finished our fiscal year, which runs through March 31st, in the black. We took in more revenue than expenses, finished with a net increase of in assets of about $150,000. Several members attended a meeting with the auditors, and we had a very clean audit. It was an audit where there were no issues of concern raised, nothing but positives. So again, things are being done the right way. Things are being spent properly, and your money is, and your donations, which are so desperately needed, are being used carefully and wisely. And given that we are in the black, I want to just also make the pitch that that doesn't mean we don't need the money. We really do need the money, and there's a lot that we're not doing that we probably should be doing and be doing more of, and replacing equipment and being able to compensate staff properly and all those kinds of things that go with running an operation, which Harry does so well and the staff performs so well. So with that, I would like to just close out my comments by, again, thanking all of you for your volunteerism, for your dedication to our loons. I know in our family, there's nothing more exciting to our family and guests when we have that loon come by or they hear that loon call, and it's just magical. And you all get it, and we really appreciate how much you support us. Thanks so much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Deans, Chair of the Development Committee. And thanks to all of you, LPC has had another very successful year raising money to support the many wonderful programs that LPC conducts, and many of you are very involved in. And I thank you all for what you've done, both as volunteers and with your checkbook too, which is very helpful. As Bob says, we do need the money, and that is true, and you have come through and really supported us in a very major and special way. We did come off a incredibly successful capital campaign. You see the results of that with the wonderful building right next door here in the renewal of this structure. People said it couldn't be done. It was done in spades. And, Betsy McCoy told me yesterday that, 100% of our pledges were fulfilled. And that's unusual in a capital campaign where everybody paid what they said they would. And so hooray for us. That was wonderful. We continue to raise funds for the Squam Lake Loon initiative. Sandy McGinnis back there has done a wonderful job leading that effort. The lead tackle buyback program always needs more support, and we appreciate the help that many of you have given that, and thank you for your help with that program. But by far the biggest event for the development committee this last year was the hiring of Betsy McCoy, our wonderful director of development and membership. Betsy has come on board and provided the committee and the board with wonderful support, and deserves an awful lot of the credit for the success we've had. And Betsy, thank you. Where's Betsy? Thank you, Betsy. Up here as an 80-year-old, I think of estate planning. And I guess I just would like to make a little note to people as you're looking at your estate planning. I hope you'll consider remembering LPC. It's very easy to add a little clause to your trust or will to say, in my passing, I'd like to give something to LPC. And we have something called the Loon Legacy Society, which we would invite you to join. Tell us that you have noted in your estate plan that LPC will receive something on your death. And we would be very pleased to have you join the Loon Legacy Society. So please consider that. And again, I really thank all of you for what you've done. The annual support at the annual drive in November has been very successful. We had a program of major donors that came together for an event last week, and that was very successful. And we really appreciate all people do in supporting LPC. So another great year, and thank you again for your support.
I'd like to ask Harry to present the Spirit of the Loon Award, and then to stay after the meeting adjourns to give his annual report.
Good. Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Tom. And good evening, everybody. And thank you for being here. Thank you for your support, for your volunteerism and your donations. It's all very much appreciated. So it is my pleasure this evening to present the Loon Preservation Committee's Spirit of the Loon Award. And first, a few words about the award itself. So the Loon Preservation Committee's founder, Rawson Wood, created LPC in 1975, almost single-handedly through sheer force of will. And so Rawson, Betsy, you know. So Rawson, as much as anyone and more than most, knew the power of individuals in creating a future for loons here in New Hampshire. And 16 years ago, we at the Loon Preservation Committee were anticipating celebrating Rawson's 100th birthday. And our dilemma was, what do you get a 100-year-old man who has everything? So we finally decided that we would take that occasion to honor Rawson in a way that we knew would be meaningful to him by creating an annual award to honor individuals who exemplify outstanding volunteer service to loons and the Loon Preservation Committee. So LPC has close to 1,000 volunteers, and we appreciate each and every one of you. But one person stood out for this year because of her unique contributions to loon conservation, and that person is Eunice Jackson. So Eunice's contributions to the Loon Preservation Committee are far-reaching, and they're significant. She and her husband, Jerry, have been members of LPC, and Eunice has volunteered for LPC since 2018. As a Loon Center greeter, Eunice has put her background as a high school science teacher to good use to engage visitors to the Loon Center and to recruit new members and new volunteers for us as well. She's always there to help with mailings and prepare the Loon Center here and the Kitty and John Wilson Field Operations Center for special events, as well as regular maintenance and cleaning. She was instrumental in helping to pack up the Loon Center back in 2020 as we began the construction process here to expand our center, and then to carefully unpack and find homes for the contents on the other end. That included organizing office supplies, field supplies, and biological samples, including the mammoth undertaking of organizing and boxing all of LPC's loon eggshells going back to the 1970s by year. Eunice helped with our rescue of 10 iced-in loons from Winnipesaukee last year, as Bob was noting. So she stayed long into the night to feed tired and hungry LPC staff, and she held loons while we took blood samples from those birds. So she's become an integral part of the Loon Center, and her untiring work helps ensure that everything here goes off smoothly. Eunice also serves as a key LPC volunteer on Wakanda Pond. She allows our biologists to show up at any time, often with no advance notice, and use her boat to survey loons or to check on the loon nest. She shares our educational posts to the Wakanda Facebook page, and she encourages others on the pond to report sightings and support LPC. When she saw photos on that Facebook page of a beach loon on Wakanda, she contacted many people on the pond who didn't realize that this was a sign of a distressed loon to ask them to alert LPC if they saw it, that it beached itself again. Eunice and Jerry organized a sign building workday at their house to replace their old loon nesting area signs. And Eunice has helped to set up the loon cam, as well as storing LPC's loon nest raft and helping to float and retrieve it every year. She's not afraid of getting her hands dirty. And Caroline fondly remembers Eunice on her hands and knees beside her, digging up moss to add to the loon nesting raft. And she spends so much time volunteering for us that she is, for all practical purposes, a year-round unpaid employee of the Loon Preservation Committee. She's also involved her whole family in the Loon Preservation Committee. So her daughter held a Facebook fundraiser for LPC on Eunice's birthday last year. And Eunice is also known and loved for noticing things that are needed to help staff. And so as one of many examples, she saw Caroline installing a Loon camera mounting post with a sledgehammer that had a cracked handle. And the very next day, Eunice showed up at LPC with a brand new sledgehammer for us, right? So she demonstrates in so many ways how much she cares for LPC staff and our work to help the loons. Eunice has been an important partner in LPC's efforts to protect and recover loons here in New Hampshire. LPC and all of us who value loons and wildlife owe a debt of gratitude to her for her volunteer work. And I'm so very pleased to name her our Spirit of the Loon Award recipient for this year. So Eunice, if you happy to come up. You'd like to say to you?
Harry asked me if I'd like to say a few words. A few words. I want to first thank my husband, Jerry, because he's been so supportive of my coming here anytime to do anything and helping out. And he's actually the one that bought the sledgehammer. And it's a wonderful experience. I have so much fun here. I would encourage everybody to really get to know the staff and to spend some time here volunteering, because it's totally fun. And thank you very much, everybody, for this nice award.
Great. Okay,
Right.
so, and I will open the shutter here on this.
No, thank you.
So, yeah. Good. I want to thank Caroline for her technical assistance as well. As we are doing a quick run through of this, I say, Caroline, if I get into trouble and need some technical assistance, I'm going to give you a really subtle, signal. It's gonna be this. We go through it, so. But here we are.
Hello.
It's always a little bit more complicated. I mean, an in-person event is easy. A YouTube, or a Zoom event is easy, but sometimes the hybrid events can be really, really hard, challenging. So.
All right, we're all.
Hey, fantastic. Let me see. All right. And just need to find that. Great. Good. And so could I actually have the light?
Yeah.
I think here. Good. Darker the better, because, well, yes, all of them if you can. Good. That sounds great. Good. I think we're set.
We should close this somehow too.
We could turn this light off. Yes. Great. Good. All right. So I'd like to talk for a few minutes here about LPC's work this summer to help our loons cope with some of the challenges that they have been facing, and also present some preliminary results to give you all a sense of what kind of a summer it was for New Hampshire's loons. To start at the beginning, Loon Preservation Committee was created in 1975 because people had noticed that loons were becoming less common on our lakes. The thinking at that time was that if human activities had contributed to those declines, and it seemed pretty likely that they had, then human activities, if they were thoughtful and coordinated, could reverse those declines once again. And that's the hope and the philosophy on which the Loon Preservation Committee was created. Our mission is to restore and maintain a healthy population of loons throughout the state, to monitor the health and the productivity of loons and loon populations as indicators of environmental quality or the health of our lakes and ponds, and also to promote a greater understanding and a wider appreciation of loons in the larger natural world. So here we are at the Loon Center in Molten Borough. This is our headquarters and our visitor center, but LPC carries out programs of monitoring and research and management and education throughout the entire state. And we're helping those efforts by close to 1,000 volunteers throughout the state. Here are a number of these volunteers at a raft and sign building day this Earth Day in April, right here at the Loon Center. And we also have a small but dedicated staff. So every year we hire a number of these seasonal field biologists to help us carry out our work across the state. This is our lineup for 2023. And together our members and our volunteers and our staff do several things. And the first thing that we do is count loons. And so I like to say that our work begins and ends with counting loons, because counting loons gives us our first indication of problems with our loon population, and it's the ultimate measure of our success in trying to keep these birds common. So we have been monitoring loons since 1975. In that span of years, we have actually created the longest running and the most comprehensive database on loon populations and productivity that exists anywhere in the world right here in New Hampshire. So this is our North Country biologist, Michelle Adams, setting out to look for loons this year on Cherry Pond, Dave Gavatsky's stomping grounds. And what a beautiful place. So this year, LPC volunteers and staff monitored 338 lakes throughout the state. And we deal with that large number of lakes by carving the state up into these different monitoring regions. And we assign a biologist to each of these regions. And then we have one biologist each on our largest lakes. So that's Winnipesaukee and Squam. And for the past almost 10 years now, I think we have been actually working with the Umbagog Wildlife Refuge to have one of their technicians count loons on Lake Umbagog and report back to us. This year, we actually carved that lakes region up into a west and an east region, and then even carved a little bit of Pemigewasset region out of that as well. Happily, that's because we have more loons now. Less happily, it's because those loons are facing greater challenges as well. And so it's one thing to say that our loon populations are increasing or they're decreasing, but we also want to know what are the factors that are contributing to those changes. And so we do research of various kinds. And banding loons is one of those research activities. And so here's our Monadnock region biologist, Sam Arnold, about to band a loon. It's being held by our outreach biologist, Caroline Hughes, and our Sunapee region biologist, Dylan Ricker. This was on Eastman Pond this summer. And we band loons because despite their popularity, there's still a lot that we don't know about these birds. So even basic questions, right? Like how long does a loon live? Do loons mate for life? Do the same loons come back to the same lakes, year after year? What is their age at first reproduction? What is their reproductive output over their lifetime? Do the chicks come back to the same lake or the same general area on which they were born? Where do our loons here in New Hampshire go in the wintertime? And what are the migratory pathways that they use to go back and forth? All of those things until very recently were unknown. And even today, they're still based on very limited data. So this is information that we feel we need to have in order to assure these birds of a bright future. So every loon that we ban gets an individual combination of bands. And so every bird that we ban gets an aluminum, and I'll hand these around, an aluminum Fish and Wildlife Service band. And if you have a close look at this band, you'll see that there's a number on these bands. And it's a unique serial number. So you can think about this as a social security number, right, for a loon. But the problem is, as soon as you're a foot away, you can't read those little numbers anymore. And that's why we put these colored, plastic leg bands on these loons. And every loon gets an individual combination. So there's only one loon anywhere in New Hampshire, anywhere in North America for that matter, that's going to have, say, a silver over orange on the left leg and a red dot over a blue stripe on the right leg. And with a good pair of binoculars, you can see those band combinations from 1/4 of a mile away. And then we can begin to follow those loons over their lifetime and get at all of these pieces of information that we want to know. So this is Caroline holding the Coniston Lake female from this year, sporting her new bands. I'll hand these. So this year so far, we spent 14 nights banding and banded 33 new loons across the state. As long as we have a loon in the hand, we take a small sample of blood. We can test that blood for lead, for mercury, for other contaminants, for stress indicating hormones, for blood parasites. We can do genetics work on that blood. So we can learn an awful lot about the health of these birds just by taking that little sample of blood. And this is Sam again, drawing a sample of blood from that same Eastman Pond loon. We also clip a couple of feathers, and we can test those feathers for mercury. In the past, we've tested them for cyanobacteria toxins. We can do genetics work on the feathers as well. And this is Caroline clipping a wing feather of a loon caught on Pleasant Lake in Deerfield this summer. We also collect inviable loon eggs from failed nests. So once we're absolutely sure that those eggs are not going to hatch, we will go in and try and get those before a scavenger or a predator gets them. This is Sarah Kanicki, our West Lakes region biologist, collecting loon eggs from a failed nest on Lee's Pond, just across the road here this summer. Those are 2 of 94 eggs we collected from failed nests in 2023. We will test some of those eggs for a wide range of contaminants. So here is our Squam Lakes biologist, Tiffany Grotti, taking some measurements of an inviable egg collected from Squam Lake before logging it into LPC's freezer. Tiffany and LPC were able to continue our work to understand and reverse the declines of loons on Squam Lake, thanks to the generous support of donors to our Squam Lake Loon Initiative. And LPC submitted a comprehensive report on the results of its egg testing to date to the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. This is back in November of 2021. And that report caught the attention of those agencies. New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services is now funding the analysis of 144 loon eggs collected from failed nests over the past 6 years for PFAS, which we all know is one of these forever chemicals that's becoming a cause of great concern among researchers now. And those eggs are at the laboratory now. We also work to rescue loons in distress. Those rescues began early this year as we found 6 loons trapped in a small pool of open water in the Broads in Winnipesaukee in February. Warm weather and open water meant that those loons stayed on Winnipesaukee too long. And by the time the ice closed in on them, they were into their winter wing feather molt, which meant that they could not fly away. So we got some help from the Tuftonboro Fire Department with some rescue folks in an airboat. On that first day, LPC senior biologist John Cooley and Caroline and crew caught 4 birds, and that was a long day in the lake for all of them. The next day, John and I suited up and set out to catch the rest of them. No airboat this time, and it felt like a long walk to that open water over successively thinner ice as the ice cracked under our feet. My board is always telling me that I need to delegate more, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to do that. So I had John go first across that ice. And that was another long day as John caught the last 2 loons. So here's Caroline labeling a vial of blood that she just took from one of those birds. From here, they went to the Caves Veterinary Clinic in Concord for x-rays, and then to wildlife rehabilitator Maria Colby for rehab and feeding. And then we were able to release all 6 to the ocean. So here's one of those birds being released by John and Maria. So our rescues continued through the year. Here are Caroline and Michelle right after they rescued a loon on a tiny unnamed pond in Colebrook. That pond was so small that the loon landed on it, but was unable to take off again. So that's why it was in need of rescue. And And here's Michelle releasing a loon rescued from Big Brook Bog in Pittsburgh. So in total, we have rescued 24 loons to date this year, and there will be more before the year is through. Not all rescued loons can be released again, though. Our less fortunate loons have historically gone to Mark Pokris, a veterinarian at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University. So one of the best ways of finding out what's affecting loons at a population level is to find out what's killing individuals. So we have been sending dead loons to Mark since the mid-1980s, and he has been telling us what they died of. So this, for instance, is how we found out about lead tackle and the issue of lead tackle in our loons. Mark retired a number of years ago now, but not really. He's continued to help us. And one of the many ways Mark continues to help us is by sending great veterinarians and veterinary students our way. So here is Emily Gurnan in the Loon Center lab downstairs doing a health check on a chick that was rescued this summer. In a typical year, one of the prime causes of adult loon mortality would be ingested lead fishing tackle, like this poor loon that we picked up on Round Pond in Pittsburgh last year. So far this year, we have picked up only one lead poisoned one lead poisoned loon. And that is one too many, but it is a lot better than the 11 or 12 that we have had in some other years. And I'm going to take that as evidence that our lead tackle buyback program is working. This is the 6th year of that program to give $10 vouchers to people who hand in their old lead tackle at participating tackle shops so that they can buy loon safe, non-toxic tackle. This year, we added 7 tackle shops to our program. Here is Caroline at one of those new shops, the North Country Angler in Conway, with its owner, Steve Angler. We are now at 17 shops giving out vouchers throughout the state. And at each of those 17 shops, the person turning in the largest amount of tackle this year is going to get a check from LPC for $100. And the person handing in the second largest amount of tackle at each of those shops will get a check for $50. And so we're serious about keeping this lead out of our loons and out of our lakes. Please do visit loonsafe.org for details of that program and a list of retailers that are participating in it. So far, we've collected over 50,000 pieces of lead tackle through that program. This is Logan Cron, our lead tackle buyback intern, with his lead tackle buyback display at the Loon Festival this summer. We also work in other ways to minimize human impacts on loons. And so we float nesting rafts to help loons that have been displaced from their traditional nesting sites because of shoreline development or recreational use. These rafts also help loons that are on lakes with changing water levels because they float. So they go up and down as those water levels change. This is John floating a raft on Hawkins Pond this spring. This year, LPC staff and volunteers floated 148 of those nesting rafts on lakes throughout the state, which was a new record. Here is LPC volunteer Janet Yardley floating a raft via paddleboard on Spoonwood Lake this spring. That is not something that I had seen before. And those rafts were successful. So more than 1 of every 4 chicks hatched in the state this year came from a raft floated by the Loon Preservation Committee. This is Caroline floating a raft on Upper Baker Pond this spring. We also float signs and rope lines around nesting loons to give them the space that they need to incubate those eggs and hatch those chicks successfully. This is our Winnipesaukee biologist, Everett Fidian Green. In the back there, you can see LPC biologist emeritus, Ralph Kirshner. They're building signs in our Kitty and John Wilson Field Operations Center. We protected 119 nesting pairs of loons with signs this year. Here are Logan and our East Lakes region biologist, Senna Doneski, floating signs on Bear Camp Pond this summer. Pairs protected by signs hatch more than 1 of every 2 chicks hatched in the state. So here are our volunteer Ann Hare-Lambie and Logan putting out signs and rope lines on Silver Lake this summer. Once those chicks are hatched, we will sometimes float these caution loon chick signs to slow down boat traffic in brooding areas. This is our Pemigewasset biologist, Will Crone, and volunteer Ken Jewell floating one of those signs on Winnisquam this summer. We also worked with dam owners to try and maintain stable water levels during those critical loon nesting periods, which was a challenge this year. And altogether, more than 3 of every 4 loon chicks hatched in the state benefited from LPC's management efforts this year. And we're confident that every loon benefited from our educational efforts. And so those included our new educational signs posted at access points of lakes. We gave in-person talks at lake associations and other venues and right here at the Loon Center. And we continued our partnership with the Squam Lakes Natural Science Center to have Tiffany give loon cruises on Squam. Caroline and our outreach intern, Melanie Caroline, also led guided loon watching paddles on many lakes. This is a guided tour on Pemigewasset Lake. And so far this year, we have given 130 of these in-person talks and paddles. Caroline has continued to expand our Loon Preservation Committee website. We have a lot of information there on loon natural history, including the calls of the loon and loon behavior. And we have information about our work in support of loons. So please do check us out at loon.org. Caroline continues to publish our LPC e-newsletter as well. That now goes out to more than 6,300 people. Our Instagram account has over 1,300 followers. Our YouTube channel has over 7,000 subscribers now. And Caroline also updates our Facebook page, and we have over 13,000 followers. Yeah. LPC's Loon webcam enthralled people and animals once again this summer. We had over 360,000 human views and close to 40,000 chat messages from people all over the United States and the world. So LPC super volunteer Bill Gassman and a number of LPC staff members all put in a huge effort to broadcast that nesting pair of loons to the world. And so we've been working hard to get the word out in different ways this year. We also have a number of events to celebrate loons and our fascination with them. The third Saturday of July is an important day for loons in New Hampshire. It starts with our loon census, which is our annual effort to get as many people as possible out in the lakes counting loons between 8 to 9 o'clock in the morning. This is Dylan looking for loons on census day. We had 440 people and at least 2 Labrador retrievers take part in that fine tradition. I will say that one of my dogs is obviously taking her census duties more seriously than the other. But altogether, we counted 489 loon adults and chicks, and those figures are rolled up into our season-long monitoring. We then starting at 10 o'clock that same day, we had our Loon Festival. So Meredith Rotary was there with free hot dogs and ice cream for everyone. LPC biologists gave loon talks in the garage of our Kitty and John Wilson Field Operations Center. You could dunk a loon biologist if you answered a loon question correctly, or even if you couldn't, but contributed $1 to the cause. And there were kids crafts and a live band, and you can even get your face painted. So here is Sarah being painted by former LPC field biologist Emily Landry, who comes back to help to volunteer for us every year on our Loon Festival. So it's been a busy and a challenging year. And like all nonprofits, we rely on our volunteers to help us in our work. So I'll take this opportunity to thank all of our volunteers and supporters for your help this year. We could not do this work without you. Thank you. And soon enough, it was time to pull our rafts and signs off the water again to wait for another spring and another loon breeding season. And then take all that data that we collected over the course of the summer and enter it into LPC's database. And that's not exciting work, but it is important. This year, we entered a 49th year of data on loons and our work to preserve them into that LPC database. And here are the results of that work. And so the good news here is that in 2023, we had more than 4 times the number of paired adults as we did when we began our work back in 1975. And paired adults, and this is the red line, this is simply an adult that pairs up with another adult that will defend a lake or an area of water from intruding loons and has at least the potential to breed and to contribute to that next generation. So again, these numbers are preliminary. But it looks like our number of paired adults was level or might even, have gone down a pair or two. Right now, that stands at 343 pairs. but we are still going through a pretty exhaustive, procedure of checking these things. So those could still go up or down by a few pairs. Now, only a proportion of those pairs breed. That's the black line, nesting adults. And that was actually up from last year and set a new record this year. But chicks hatched and chicks surviving were down markedly from the records that we set last year. And so as nice as it is to see this general, long-term upward trend, we still got a long way to go to reach historical levels of loons in New Hampshire and levels that we think New Hampshire's lakes could and should support today. That's somewhere in between those two green lines. And it's getting harder, to continue that recovery. If we go a little deeper into that data, we get these relative reproductive success parameters. And so the blue line on this graph is the proportion of territorial pairs that nested. So this year, that was about 70% of territorial pairs that actually nested. And by that, we mean created a nest and laid at least one egg in that nest. And that's pretty much right on the long-term average. The red line is hatching success. And that's, as you can see, that's by far the most variable of these statistics. This year, we had about 0.8 chicks hatched per nesting pair, and that is one of the worst results that we have seen in all of our years of monitoring. And then the green line is chick survival. So once a chick was hatched, it had about a 70% chance of surviving till this point in the season. That is close to our 10-year average, but there is a slight hint here, maybe, of a downward trend. So this is something that we're going to be keeping our eyes on. And if you put all those trends together, right? So the fact that only a proportion of territorial pairs get to the business of nesting, those nesting pairs have a certain number of chicks hatched, and then a proportion of those chicks hatched survive to this point, we come up with this statistic, chicks surviving per territorial pair. So the red line on this graph is 0.48 chicks surviving per territorial pair. And that's the number that we know from research conducted by Loon Preservation Committee and by other organizations. We know that we need to hit that line as often as not to maintain a stable and a viable loon population in New Hampshire. And of course, we want to do more than just maintain. We want to continue to grow and to recover our loon population. So in 2023, we were well below that line. And this is an important graph because the periods in New Hampshire where we have experienced the strongest growth in our loon population, they can date back to those times, right, where we have spent a good number of years well above that red line. And recently, as you can see, it's been harder to stay above that red line. And so our concern as we look at this graph is that as we continue to lose adult loons from lead tackle ingestion or from monofilament entanglement or from collisions with boats or jet skis or just natural causes, where are the chicks going to be coming from to replace those adults that we're losing? So the good news here is that even with this bad year, we have been at or above that line for 6 out of the past 10 years. This year, 51% of loon nests were successful. That is lower than last year. Some of those nests resulted in only one chick, right? So that's success light, but it's still success, and we will take it. Of the nests that failed, close to half of them fail for unknown reasons. And this is because, a raccoon or a mink or an eagle can swoop down and take an egg in a blink of an eye. And unless we have people, unless we have eyes on that nest at the exact moment that happened, or a camera trained on that nest, often we simply don't know what caused that nest failure. But of the known causes of nest failure, we humans play a role in most. And so human disturbance is obvious. This is just people getting too close to an incubating loon and flushing that loon off of the nest. Even there's good news, because if that happens and you turn around and leave the area right away, the chances are pretty good that that loon will get back on the nest in 20 or 30 minutes. But the danger is that on a really hot day, that egg can cook on the nest. On a cold and a rainy day, it can chill. Either one of those can kill an embryo developing inside of that loon egg. And it also leaves those eggs exposed to any predators that are working their way along the shoreline or flying overhead and looking for an easy meal. And so many of those predations may have a human component as well. So populations of egg predators like raccoons and gulls have benefited from their close association with people. So they've been eating our trash, they've been fruitful, they multiplied, and their populations are now at unnaturally high levels, which can put pressure on loons and our other native wildlife. And again, some of those predations may well have happened only after people flushed that loon off of the nest. But the big story in 2023 were these floodings, right? And we bear some responsibility there as well, because many of our lakes are impounded. And if we put a dam at the outflow of that lake, then we have some, amount of control and responsibility for where that water level is on the lake. Also, we humans love to pave things, right? And so by doing that, we create these impermeable surfaces, and instead of sinking into the ground, that water sluices across those paved surfaces and then right back into our lakes and ponds. And of course, there was the astounding amount of rainfall that we had this summer, due at least in part to climate change. So the benefit of having 49 years of data is that we can look back and see how loons fare in wet years and in dry years, in hot years, in cool years, in years with heat waves, and in years with storm events. And so we know that a lot of rain and rain events increase nest failures of our loons. And in June, we didn't have record rainfall, but we had almost exactly twice the normal amount of rainfall. So by the end of the month of June, our ground was saturated. And then any additional rainfall that came down had no place to go except right into our lakes and ponds, where they raised those water levels. And then we had a record wet July, right? And so we actually had more flash flood advisories in the month of July in New Hampshire than we had had in any previous year in this state. So that caused a lot of nest failures. And the concerning thing here is that those rainfall and those storm events are all predicted to increase with climate change as we go into the future. So rafts, can help in a year like this, but we set new records for the rafts that we put out, and it was not enough, to compensate entirely for that huge amount of rainfall that we saw. And we would all like to see loons nesting on a piece of natural shoreline, if they're able to. And many loons seem to feel the same way, because only 35% of the rafts that we floated this year were actually used by loons. So it's kind of painful, right, to see a loon nesting on a piece of natural shoreline and then get flooded out when we had floated a nesting raft just 10 feet away for it. But they make their own choices. Some loons take to rafts and some loons don't. So we're continuing to research ways to help loons cope with the changing climate and all of their other challenges. We'll continue to put the results of that research to work in focused management and focused outreach to help our loons thrive in the future, in the hopes of continuing that recovery and maintaining that viable population of loons here in New Hampshire. And so to wrap up, for our volunteers and our staff, it was a summer of good work to benefit our loons, sometimes under beautiful blue skies, and sometimes not. And maybe most of the time not. So here's our Seacoast region biologist, Ethan Hobbs, and during a typical day this summer. And if the rain let up for a few minutes, there were still all the usual challenges like wind and bugs to contend with. And then when the sun was shining, we were dealing with high heat and high humidity. So here's poor Ethan soaked in sweat after hauling his kayak back from a remote lake. And I don't think Ethan dried out all summer. So we had a great field crew though, and they remained happy and upbeat through what was a challenging summer for them as well as the loons. They continued to count loons even on a rare day off. And they worked hard, and it was good and it was necessary work for our loons. And of course, there's still much work to be done, right? And the impacts of LPC's work go far beyond loons and far beyond New Hampshire. Loons are a sentinel of environmental quality. They're an indicator of the health of our aquatic ecosystems. So they're scientifically important, and they have this wide public appeal. And that is why they have found themselves to be the focal point of so many of these environmental issues. And that means that if we can save loons, then we can save a lot of other species that depend on the same clean water and quiet places. And I like to think that at the same time as we've been working to recover our loon population, we've also been working to encourage an environmental ethic. And that's something that's going to benefit not just loons, but other wildlife and even the people and the economy of New Hampshire, because after all, that's a large part of the reason why so many of us want to visit or to live here. And so I hope that the end result of all of our efforts will be a bright future for loons in New Hampshire. And I prefer to think of this as a sunrise photo. So that is the end of my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions that folks have about loons or LPC's work in support of loons. Yes, Dave.
Harry, was this an unusual summer for single chick hatches? Or was it?
Yeah. So last year, what made the difference is that we, of our successful nests, we had a greater proportion of 2 chicks hatch from those nests. And so it's interesting because there's been a good deal of speculation as well. I mean, could temperature effects, could water, rainfall effects and things be just increasing the number of loons that become inviable for whatever reason, even to the point of having 1 egg and a 2 egg clutch become inviable, and then having only 1 egg hatch, from those. So, and Dave, these are still, we're right at the beginning of trying to figure this out. So it was all that we could do to put together the main, numbers. But over the fall and the winter, we will be digging into questions like that and determining what we can find and how we can help loons better as a result of those findings. Yeah, Dana.
In terms of the Dam Bureau's regulations, what can dam operators do when they have these large water
Yes.
increases?
Yes.
Can they drop the level of the lake, or are they restricted from how much they can send downstream?
Boy, so Dana, that's a good question. And I'm not exactly sure what the answer was. I will say that in a year like this, with the best of intentions, I think dam operators were taxed to keep those water levels stable. Because so often, these lakes are part of a chain of lakes. And as our old board member, Ralph Kirshner, says, if you open the floodgates on Winnipesaukee, you flood downtown Laconia. And so sometimes there's a limit to what we can do. If we are able, with 2020 hindsight, and we could really figure out how to anticipate when there's a large rain event coming and preemptively, draw down lake levels a little bit. But that's a risky business as well and difficult to do.
For next year, we can really explore this with the Dam Bureau further to give dam operators, because there has been for many years now a letter that was sent to the dam operators from LPC and the state with instructions that they should anticipate water increases from rainfall and begin to draw down their lakes.
Yeah.
That did not happen on my lake.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think, continued outreach to those dam operators, which I'm sure, Dana, you will make sure happens for us as well, is going to be very helpful in doing that. And as I said, this year, I think it was, we were, taxed to be able to cope with that, because the amount, I don't think anyone really could have anticipated the amount of rainfall. As you saw, we were almost off the chart, on that rainfall graph. And as the interesting thing as well, though, is as John was creating this graph, he and I had a conversation downstairs in his office, and updating this from 7 or 8 years ago, there were a lot more points in that high and the high right-hand side of that graph. So summers are getting rainier in New Hampshire. And I think that we're going to probably have more of these really challenging years for our loons, and the years like last year where things are moderately calm and we can really make hay and have a bumper crop and records. Right. And so those may become fewer and further between. So our challenge will be to mitigate as much as possible bad years like this one, and then make sure that we make the most of those good years going forward. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have data for a two hatching nest down the chick pushing the or?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we do have, data on how many of those second chicks, survive from 2 egg, clutches. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more or less a 50-50 proposition, or it's in that range in any case. So some 2 egg, some broods with 2 chicks, they get along fine and they can bring those 2 chicks off, and others, there is a little bit of sibling rivalry and things. The interesting thing here is that parents don't play favorites. They will simply feed the first chick that comes to them, but that dominant chick means that it's the first chick that gets there. And this is where, for instance, it's really important as we observe loons to be able to give these birds some space, right? So I always say there's only one way to get close to a pair of loons on the water, and that's with a good pair of binoculars, right? There's only one way to take a photo of loons on the lake, and that's with a long telephoto lens. Because as soon as we get too close to these loon families, what happens is they stop what they were doing, which is the reason why we wanted to observe them in the first place, and begin to react to us as a potential threat or potential predator. And when that happens, feeding is reduced. And when that happens, that second chick doesn't get fed. And so this is one of those reasons why we always advocate for people to keep their distance, from loons and let them do their thing on the water. So this is one concrete way in which we can help these loon families and have more of those second chicks survive. Yes, Bob.
Harry, tonight we had a nice presentation on the income and expense side of the income ledger.
Yeah.
Could we get in future years, and maybe could I get this coming week, copy of the balance sheet?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, good. Yep, we can absolutely do that. Good. Yes.
What about the destruction of the shoreline, wake boats and so on?
Yeah.
How's that impacting the marine population?
Yes. Yeah. I have to tell you, I'm not a big fan of the wake boats, and so these things. I don't think that the increase in the amount of shoreline erosion and the amount of cyanobacteria blooms and increased turbidity in the water is unrelated to the increase in the number of wake boats that are, causing these large waves and roiling up the bottom. And so it's probably the last thing, that New Hampshire's lakes need. And I mean, looking at it, it looks like great fun. But I think that there's probably a time and place to do that, which may be way out in the Broads on Winnipesaukee and not, on our smaller lakes or closer into the shoreline, for doing that. So we do lose, and we did lose nests to wakes. And sometimes it's hard to know if that's from a wake boat or if it's from a motor boat, but we know that wake boats throw these big waves, and that can flood a loon nest, and it can wash an egg right out of a loon nest as well. So it's definitely something that we're going to want to keep our eye on going forward. Yeah. And
What can you do about it?
well, we actually worked with New Hampshire Lakes Association, and we helped to fund a study in the Midwest about the kinetic energy of those waves and what would be protective in terms of an increased no wake zone. So requiring those wake boats to be further out from shore as they do their thing. And so the study, gave very useful results. We were part of a coalition of organizations that presented that to the New Hampshire legislature. The wake boat industry is pretty powerful, and they pushed back, and that legislation did not go anywhere. But I feel like we'll continue to work that, and of course we can educate people, as well, if they know that these wake boats can do harm to loons if they're not used in appropriate areas of the lake. The hope is that people will be able to do that, and our entire philosophy here at LPC is that loons and people can thrive in each other's company, right? If we follow a few simple precautions. Right? So I think probably just one more question, and then we should, because John Rockwood's presentation is still coming up as well. Sandy.
All right. On Swamp Lake this year, for the first time in my memory, more loon chicks were lost because of attacking loon than any problem at all.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and Sandy, I would argue that is in part a man-made problem as well, because as you know, the Squam has had a tumultuous recent history, and so we saw the greatest decline that we've ever observed in the nesting territorial pairs of loons on Squam Lake. And since then, we've seen higher than average mortality from a number of causes, including lead tackle. And in that case, so as Tiffany will say, loons have evolved to thrive in a stable environment and a stable social structure. And Squam's lakes have really had neither of those. And right, there we go. Right. But it's interesting. And this gets at, some of the intricacies of this loon work as well, because not only has continued mortality on Squam Lake resulted in this churn, because as soon as there's a vacant territory, nature abhors a vacuum, other loons flood in, and then they create this tumult and confusion and things. And so there is definitely that issue, but there's also the issue that some of the contaminants that we are finding in loon eggs on Squam have been shown to increase aggressive, behaviors in animals and in people. And it may also be the same thing on Squam as well. And so there are a number of factors there that are at play, I think. Yeah, great. Oh, all right. One last question. Sure, I keep on saying that.
Is it going to mature in time?
Yeah, so we have a couple of chicks that were born only they're probably only 2 or 3 weeks old. now, but we're confident, especially if it's a single chick, that's getting all the attention of those parents. They're stuffing it full of food, and they're likely as not, it will be fine. So yeah, we wouldn't want it to delay for much longer. And this one may just kind of, get out, under the wire, but it will probably, I would think that it would be fine. Great. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. And so Caroline is going to bring up John's presentation, and as she does so, I'll just take a minute to introduce John. So John is a noted wildlife photographer. He is, and he's also thankfully, he's been a recently much more that they do to seeing John's presentation, and I think we'll make it almost ready to go.
Do we know that the sound is on?
Right.
I was gonna say.
Let's see.
Well, don't think here. Should there be sound right now, Don?
The show does have actually to ground up
Then restart, John.
The music is again to drown out the motorboats and the airplanes and jets that come over Massabesic 24/7.
It might blast out at us. Let me just
Okay.
reduce this a little bit before you try to play it.
And
Okay, let's try it.
can I see it while it's playing? I was gonna say when we were practicing, it was up on my screen.
Oh yeah, we can change to
That's why in the
duplicate.
past I used to stand in the back so I could see the show. I don't memorize it.
Let's share this.
And again.
No, that's not what we want.
Worked so well when we practiced it. Yeah. That's the only trouble with adding sound to the show.
Every time you do this, it's a different problem. It's never the same. You can't learn.
Okay, let's.
They keep updating the software and that's what causes the problem.
How are we looking on Zoom, Michael? Is it showing or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, but we're
That'll work.
we've got the sound. Now we just need the video.
Video on the screen, yeah. But worst comes to worst, if you can't, I'll stand at an angle.
Okay, wait, we're getting there now.
There you go.
Good on Zoom, Michael? Okay, I think we've got it. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
You are also.
What's that?
You also.
So all I need to do is hit enter, Caroline,
Yeah. Let's go, John.
maybe. It didn't go. All great. Now I don't know how you do. Okay. What is to fly in? Lake Massapequa is in Auburn and Manchester. Normally we get good results. This year we had none survive. We'll show you this again. A lot of these, as Harry says, we want you to use zoom lenses. I use zoom lenses, but you'll see as we go along, some of them think they're my pet. This is the male and female. Even though they can see each other, they're still calling to try and locate each other. Now this particular loon, you'll see this sequence twice. Little lady I call Mama. Look at 60 years. On sequence, you'll see how close she comes to land. On my eye. As they say, she and I were friends for over 16 years. Oh, someone else took it for me. They showed me about a year later. And that particular female, books and things will tell you the male picks out the nest site. In the 16 years I knew her, she picked out the nest site. She'd let the male show her 2 or 3, and then she'd promptly go somewhere else. On this particular lake, we have numerous nest sites. That particular pair likes to nest right next to the water on the sand beach if it's there. That one year, there was no sand beach. The water had gone down so far that this little lady made her nest near the water. And this one was on a big slant, so they could take turns holding the eggs while they changed position. Different one. Each loon pair seems to like certain types of vegetation or not. This is Ma again. This is her second attempt. Her first nest was drowned. This one, they let too much water out of the lake. I moved all kinds of boulders, but she still can keep getting up there. Now she did have a third nest that I never saw where it was. And that's who became the star of my book, Adventures with Grape Nut. They found a chick all by itself on the lake. And thought I was going to have a new pet, but the mother and father did show up. They had been chasing an intruder out of their territory. Again, this is kind of to show you what she would go through, still trying to maintain her eggs. Some of my first video, that's why I bounced it around. I didn't understand. I should have gone up earlier when the water was flat. Now we're going to show you the chicks. This is Grape Nut. Again, this is when I first met her. Well, actually him. He cried out to me, begging to be fed. So I was trying to figure out how I could catch minnows with my hat. Nice water repellent coat. Here's after the father came and got him. Sometimes twins won't ride on the same parent's back. They have to be separated. And I use the music so I won't talk the whole time. Other times, again, unless you saw them, they were pretty much the same size, even though one was a day older. What I found was the dominant chick tended to get less rides on the parent's back. On Lake Massapequa, there are no wake boats or water skiing. You can't even sit there. It provides water for Manchester. So it's nice that way. We don't have tons and tons of motorboats racing around. It's just the early morning fishermen who come out and they'll sit in one spot most of the day. These days with the digital, you can zoom in digitally if your camera does not have a zoom. Mom is calling to tell her mate it's his turn. From time to time, she would come over and park the little ones next to me. Usually it was when she was going to chase the intruder out of her territory. The bears and the adult Loon allowed the kids, even then when they were way too big to ride on their back. On the Tuckaway, this was the first time I'd ever seen one stick its little head out on the side. That was 5 to 8 years old. In that time period, it grew faster than others, depending on what lake they from and how much fish they could provide. When I show these pictures to non-Loon enjoying people, they always say I should have fixed the red eye. They assume we're out there using flash and it's providing a red eye. Takes forever to convince them that we only try and get the red eye. Once you convince them that red eye is good, they want to know why the little ones have no red eye. You have to explain to them it takes upwards of 2 years before their eyes turn red. Again, this one on the back is a little large to be riding on the parent's back. They allowed me to swim in this lake so we could take the underwater video without just guessing where they are under my kayak. Those lakes usually little sunfish kind. Yeah, so we now have eagles at their home, same with the Tuckaway. I've never seen them take a chick, and one year we had the eagles nesting right above a Loon nest, and they seem to get along. These are warning the other pair on Pawtuckaway that the eagle is out and about. The chick is on, yeah, gonna show you where she was hiding. Yeah, that year they only had one chick, and they were quite protective of her. Once in a while, the ospreys will set them off too if it's still darker or the sun's going down. The airplanes, they definitely go crazy for on Massabesic. They put in an east-west runway that goes right over the lake. And the male with his nice yodel. Female joining him with her tremolo. Probably about 10, 15 feet. They kept drifting closer to me. Again, sometimes some of the pairs would bring the chicks over and have them parked right next to my kayak when the planes go over them about 3 months to get used to the jets going over because the jets fly much higher than the planes. Another enemy on the lake, our great blue heron population that keeps increasing. Now, this is Ma. Her nest was around the corner on a little island. Yeah, I thought she was going to get him. From that point on, he never came back to her little nest again. Again, an eagle population. This one was on Pawtuckaway. Early mornings I was out there, no wind, and all of a sudden, family showed up next to my kayak because the eagle was moved from the south end of the lake up to the north end where their nest is. They had a single chick that year. Somehow they instinctively knew if they stayed near where I was, the eagle would not come down. They spent about an hour with me till the eagle gave up and headed back south on the lake. And when they first came up next to me, they were probably 15, 20 feet away. And again, the female, who has the chick at this point, kept drifting closer and closer to my kayak. Wants to be fed, but they're not gonna take a chance of diving and leaving him exposed. Little ones always look like they're wearing a fur coat. It doesn't look like feathers. This was one of their first morning meetings. They hadn't established if they were all friends at this point. This was after all the nests had failed for the most part. They would meet every morning. This mom chased an intruder from her territory. That particular year she had twins, which we'll see in a minute. And she liked to leave them right next to my kayak if I was out there in the morning. Needless to say, I didn't use the Zoom method. Here comes Mom with the fish. Some years her mates were friendly to me, other years they wouldn't come anywhere near the boat, no matter whether she and the little ones were next to me or not. Feeding time. Some males tended to take turns on Massapequa. Once in a while, the male would hand the fish to the female to feed them. Most of the time, whoever caught the fish would hand it up. Massapequa, for the most part, whenever there were twins, they got along the whole time. There was plenty of fish. There was never a question of one not getting enough to eat, and the other driving it off. Now in that particular territory brought crayfish. Some chicks would eat the crayfish, others wanted no part of it. fish for themselves. I was on Swan Lake one morning. A chick around that age or younger was catching its own meal all morning. Come afternoon, it demanded to be fed. A number of the books and things say a parent brings the live fish, drops it, and has the chick chase it. I've never seen that. Always, no matter what size the chick is, they just can't eat the fish. Now this one I hadn't seen before. The chick wasn't hungry, so the parents keep passing the same minnow back and forth. They'll stick their head underwater, hand it to the other one, and then the male finally ate it. We got tired of passing it back and forth. Yeah, this one, every once in a while they bring one that's too big. And here's the male who just came in with an even bigger one. He didn't want to let it go, so he's going to eat it himself. He wanted to show his mate that he was doing his share. He's not sure what to do with it, so the male shows you what to do when it comes to eat. They wanted to go away. It's amazingly the size of fish they can swallow. This is back on Pawtuckaway. This is a female. She's finished feeding her family. One of the biggest sunfish I've ever seen. Got it down, and I figured that was good for a couple of days. So the next morning, she ate another one even bigger when I was out there in the rain, so we didn't have the video. A little wing walking here for you. Yeah, that particular one, there was nothing chasing it, so I don't know why it was going like this again. This one practicing takeoffs. Here's a little juvie. This was the end of November. It was actually one of twins. He was at this for about an hour before he ran this far. We're back on Pawtuckaway. This male had been visiting the other male at the northern end of the lake. He didn't realize my kayak was there. That's why he had to make a little detour. Marking. I've only seen one pair instead of twins mark. That particular year, the female grape nut's mother was only with the male only the 1 year. Sometimes she has the same mate a couple years in a row.
What's marking?
You'll see in a sec. Kind of like when dogs and things wet an area, instead he squirts out. Yeah, the white line is his marking. This is he and his twin when they were a little older. The male has shown them to go up and mark their territory. Most loons just excrete in the water. They're quite pleased after they mark their territory. But yeah, I'd only ever seen the one, their father and these two. I've never seen any others marked in the 30 years I've been on that lake. brother. He was a little smarter, only went about a foot off. This is the younger one. Still has most of his feathers. This is early July before the water gets full of algae and other vegetation. Again, these I'm watching from above the water, just jamming the camera under my kayak and hoping I'm getting the birds in it. And Ma, who's banded. Next to my hand. She was a wise guy. I had a couple of times when I was out in the kayak after her twins had gotten old enough to catch their own fish. She would catch a little minnow and bring it over to my kayak, trying to feed me. To tell you the truth, I don't even eat cooked freshwater fish. The water at this particular spot in her territory was only about 3 or 4 feet deep. So hence the sun was able to accommodate some fairly clear video. She's hoping to catch little minnows. There's also crayfish in this particular area. And most of the time, the little ones didn't catch anything, to tell you the truth. She and her mate would end up having to feed. What I call miscellaneous. This was the only male or loon in general I saw land with fish in its mouth. Picking up a little minnow from the other end of the lake. Plus, I always love this pose. I don't know what it's doing for them, because they don't fly very big. This particular male lost the tip of his bill. Although it should grow back next year, we did have one on Lake Massabesic that was missing about an inch of his top bill for most of his life. Again, a little wing exercise. Some people said the little chick was mad at me, so he was demonstrating. Cool sunrise. Again, these are more actually leaves on the fall. In December that year, my wife and I and the twins were the only ones on the lake, I can assure you. Fishing game stopped by when we came back to the launch and asked what the hell we were doing on the lake. A week later, these two took off to the ocean. Okay. Any questions I can try and answer for you?
That was very nice. Wonderful.
Yeah, unfortunately, there was very little new this year because we didn't have any chicks on the lake. So to get the little ones in, I had to use other years. Yeah, rained. Yeah.
Are you able to tell the males from the females on site, or do you know these two so well?
Her I knew, but again, most of the time she was banded. So if they're not banded, I have to wait till they either yodel or, well, the trouble is both can tremolo. So unless you hear,
only the male yodel.
yes, only the male yodels. Why, I don't know. Physically, the throats are the same as far as I can tell, but only the males yodel.
If they're like, I see them and I can't tell this.
No, you usually can't. No, again, at one time they thought the males were always bigger and they aren't, because I saw this particular female with nine, I believe it was 9 different mates over the 16 years. And they were all different sizes. She was bigger than half of them. And other times they'd be, huge compared to her.
Yeah.
More questions? No? Oh, sure.
Do both genders do the same amount of feeding, carrying on their backs, nesting?
They tended to, at least on Lake Massabesic anyway. Again, we have 8 territories on that one lake. And most years, at least 6 pairs, 5 to 6 pairs tried to nest. And we usually had at least one successful nest out of those, except for this year. We, between the water, kept drowning their nests. And the only pair I'd ever seen try more than one nest site was Grape Nut's mother. She would do it up to 3 times she would try. Yes, no. All right, well, if there's no more questions, I thank you all for staying for the show. And hopefully next year we'll have more chicks. Oh, thank you.
Thank you for showing.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, again, thank you for being a trustee. You're welcome.
It's great to meet you and love sleepers. I got a copy of Great Nuts. I read it like the first day it came home and read it. When it was signed. Oh, thank you, Veronica, that there's been a nesting pair every year for the past 20 years. It's given about 15 of them. It was awesome. And I've been just an avid, prolific, not an expert, but photographer. So I've got each year for 20 years. Pictures of the families. They'll be used, they're feeding between our swim club and our beach. They're just feeding the chicks right there.
That's nice.
It's incredible, like it's right at my house.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
But anyway, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Would you be open to be reaching out sometime and just making a chat more? If I get pick your brain, this is fine. Okay. I